The average person that's showing up today, 2024, has tried 8 diets, 9 diets. They're probably showing up with, the effects of that, but they're probably showing up afraid to consume any more than 800 to 1,000 calories. And so wherein do you connect with an individual? How do you get an individual on board to be consuming an adequate amount of calories? How do you lead them through that journey? That's not addressed in the textbook, because the textbook says, well, just give the person 2,000 calories, right? Well, what if the person is only willing to go to like 1,200 or 1,400? How do you navigate that? Well, the average person also comes to us, if you do an intake form, what are your goals? I want to look better and I want to perform better. It's like, okay, so you want to lose body fat and you want to increase potential strength and performance at the same time. Scientifically, what the book is going to tell you is calorie deficit, but calorie maintenance and or surplus. Well, like, when have you ever navigated an individual that can be in a deficit and a surplus at the same time?
Hey, you may have heard me interview or be interviewed by my friends at Mind Pump, guys who are well known and prolific in the fitness and nutrition coaching industry. And they recently interviewed me to a guy who's been in the fitness industry for decades as a cover model, as a professional athlete, and now as a sought after fitness and nutrition coach. His name is Jason Phillips. He's the CEO and the founder of the Nutritional Coaching Institute, which, as the name implies, teaches people how to be nutrition coaches. But I'll let Jason tell you more about that. You may have seen him on the cover of various magazines. You may have seen his book, Macros Explained. He has also written the book, Macros Applied. He's been all over Men's Fitness and podcasts such as Renegade Radio and Everforward Radio, Mind Pump, Barbell Shrugged, and of course, most importantly, now the Ben Greenfield Life Show. That's really the only one we actually care about. But anyways, Jason is a guy who knows the ins and outs of the fitness industry and the nutrition industry. So I thought it'd be fun to, I suppose talk shop a little bit, Jason. What do you think?
Yeah, man. I'm looking forward to it, dude.
Yeah. And you know what was funny? What stood out to me when I was looking over your bio was it says that you were the first one to educate the CrossFit community on the importance of post-workout supplements. That seems pretty darn specific, but I'd love to hear a little bit more of what that actually means.
Yeah. So I always say I was the most hated nutritionist in CrossFit in 2012, and then one of the most loved nutritionists in CrossFit in 2013. So if we kind of go back and we look at 2012, Paleo was the predominant diet in CrossFit. I think that officially HQ had maybe switched over to Zone, but when you went into a CrossFit gym, pretty much everybody was talking about Paleo, and it didn't add up to me that the stress response from CrossFit was so high, and that there just wasn't enough carbohydrate in the Paleo diet, not only to fuel the activity but to recover from the activity. Especially for those people choosing to compete in it. And so it sounds really basic today in 2024, but 12 years ago, just the notion of a high molecular weight carbohydrate post-workout or any sort of carbohydrate post-workout to really help facilitate an attenuation of the cortisol response of the workout, as well as help begin getting the CNS to a better place, and also to just really fuel and recover from the day. Again, it almost sounds remedial and ridiculous to say today, but 12 years ago this was novel.
So it's like the paleo diet, which I think a lot of people know is, or at least was, kind of the darling of the CrossFit community. Maybe some of it's been replaced by Carnivore now, I don't know. But what you're saying is that the level of carbohydrate intake on the paleo diet, at least traditionally applied, was so shockingly low that people weren't getting the type of glycogen replenishment that they should have been getting for a highly glycolytic sport like CrossFit. And you're the person who pointed that out to them.
Yeah. I mean, in not so many words, yeah, that was pretty much it. We saw a lot of it too was CNS regulated. I think that so many people, primarily my work at the time was done with competitive CrossFitters. So I don't want to say anybody engaging in the activity of CrossFit. So I'm going to say the sport of CrossFit. So I got people working out 2, sometimes 3 times a day for 2 hours at a time. And they're doing very little, if anything, post-workout or between sessions. And when I'm looking at their daily carbohydrate intake, I'm seeing, maybe 300 grams of carbohydrates. And so really getting them to understand, we're going deep into the nervous system into a session, and there's absolutely nothing for recovery, let alone anything nutritionally speaking. And, obviously that's evolved quite a bit, but there was nothing being done at the time.
And what do you mean when you say nervous system regulation? Do you mean that you are seeing the issues with underfueling of carbohydrates specifically show up when it came to measurements of nervous system health, like HRV or something like that?
So not necessarily HRV, but one of the things that was starting to run rampant, the big conversation at the time was more like adrenal fatigue, and I guess we, better stated HPA axis dysfunction. And basically we would just see people overreaching and overtraining relative to the overall stimulus. Life stress combined with training induced stress, under fueling, under recovering, and then the subsequent hormonal implications that showed up. I was under the guidance when I first got into CrossFit of James Fitzgerald, and one of the things he talked about was like just a cortisol response of high intensity workouts. And so basically there was, you're seeing people go harder at higher intensities, but absolutely nothing from a regulation standpoint at any time throughout the day, let alone post-workout to modulate that.
Do you think people who follow the carnivore diet now are also perhaps not eating enough carbohydrates to satisfy their training?
I can't in any way think that people doing carnivore are going to be able to perform glycolytic activity for prolonged periods of time. I don't think that I think carnivore in the short term, I could see it working, assuming like a really good hormonal profile. I think, back in the day, you did like Volik's 90% keto diet and performed reasonably well in an activity, if I recall. Wasn't there something like that?
Well, yeah, to a certain extent. That was part of Jeff Volek's study at University of Connecticut called the FASTER study, where he had a group of athletes, which I was part of, follow about an 85 to 90% fat-based ketogenic diet, very low-carb diet. You mentioned right. 300 carbs as an example of what might not be sufficient for CrossFitters. And, we're talking about closer to like 50 to 60 grams of carbohydrates per day for a year, well engaged in Ironman training, culminating in going into the Yukon lab and doing a 3-hour treadmill test, muscle biopsies, blood measurement, microbiome measurement, a VO2 max test, and indirect calorimetry, right? Like how much carbohydrates and how much fat are you burning at rest and during exercise. And what that test showed was that for long-term aerobic activity, you can really almost double what textbooks at that point had said that you could burn in terms of fat grams per minute if you'd been following a high-fat diet for a certain period of time and not necessarily have a faster aerobic time or better aerobic performance, but at least not see a decrement in aerobic performance. But then if you dig into the data, like the RPE, the rating of perceived exertion on the VO2 max test was higher, no surprises there, in the low-carb athletes. You also, and this wasn't reported in the study, but this is just anecdotal, and this would include me, thyroid dysregulation, decreased testosterone and libido, increased recovery time. And, generally, I think the takeaway from that study is that if all you're going to do is aerobic sports, then yeah, you could get away with a pretty low amount of carb intake and high fat intake, especially once you get that long-term shift into greater amounts of fat oxidation. But if you're throwing anything else into the mix, or if you want high libido, or if you don't want long-term endocrine disruption, even if you're doing a lot of aerobic activity, if you're under fueling with carbohydrates, you're still going to see some issues. So, I mean, I tried it out for a few years, and I think it is a little bit of an endurance performance hack. But if I could go back and do it over again, Jason, I would do more like a cyclic keto or cyclic low carb approach with at least a weekly refeed, if not more, of a significant amount of carbohydrates,
And so it's interesting you say that, because so like I mean, a lot of that I think is what shows up early in CrossFit. So, at the time, a lot of these CrossFit gyms were doing paleo challenges. And the reason I think paleo got its prominence is you take a very beginner CrossFit, and we understand that the majority of the training adaptation is not necessarily what we'd consider physical adaptations as much as perhaps neurological adaptations, right? Like you take a brand new person, you put them in the gym, they're going to PR every day for the first 6 to 8 months because it's just their body's learning how to move, they're learning how to lift. I'm of the opinion we could fuel that with 1,000 calories or 3,000 calories, and you're largely going to see the same response. Independent of even like the fuel source in those calories. And so, but as soon as we actually become efficient in the movements, that's when the fuel source started mattering. Well, these people did these paleo challenges. They're hypocaloric. They're expending more energy than they're used to. They're PRing in the gym, and they're like, oh my God, paleo is the best thing in the world. And they tried to apply that to high level athletics. And I think a lot of the things that you just described, anecdotally speaking, right? Thyroid dysregulation, sex hormone decrease, increase in recovery time. That's what we were seeing in high level CrossFit athletes at the time. And so I went in and it was like, man, like at the very least, we have to get carbohydrate in. Everybody thought of it in terms of just post-workout supplementation, but it was really an overall volume of CrossFit or of carbs throughout the day. Now, similar to you, I think that at that time, aerobic base was all the rage. And I actually preferred almost like a minimum effective dose type thing with refeeds, because I think that I found people felt better and actually performed better on slightly lower carbohydrate days. But yeah, I mean, that is similar application to some degree.
Yeah, and I think there's a lot of subtle nuances to it too. For example, if you're using, let's say you're an aerobic athlete and you're using kind of like that classic 80-20 polarized approach where, and this is kind of like a proven method for a lot of top aerobic athletes, 80% of your training is in more of like a zone 2 below lactate threshold easily level of intensity. And then 20% is pretty screaming high above lactate threshold. And there's not a lot of in-betweener work being done. Well, subtle nuances, for example, you could say, well, for all of that aerobic work, sure, go high fat, go ketosis, use ketone esters, limit carbs, etc. And then prior to, or the evening before, or, even during that other 20%, then you have the carbohydrates as the phrase goes, sugar is a sometimes drug, right? And use the carbohydrates as a performance enhancing aid then. And, another nuance, and I'd love to hear your take on this, is a lot of times, it's not necessarily the carbohydrates that were the issue. And maybe this is why the CrossFit or Paleo group that you were talking about felt better when they'd restrict carbs. Sometimes it's like, gluten intolerances or FODMAP intolerances because a lot of the carbohydrates were of a fermentable source. Or, I realize this gets really into the weeds, but, maybe you're sensitive to like GMOs or pesticides or herbicides or something like that was on all the bread that you'd been eating, or perhaps you have some type of like a fructose intolerance. And so, I'd be curious how many people feel good on I guess a higher carbohydrate intake, but a higher carbohydrate intake that comes more from safe starches, right? Like underground storage roots, purple potatoes, sweet potatoes, berries, honey, etc., versus like more of a grain forward approach.
Yeah, I mean, I think it kind of goes into the time of year too. I mean, as you were saying, like even in like the keto diet where we introduce carbohydrate intraactivity, those aren't those aren't going to be what anybody would consider like the cleanest sources of carbs, right? Like they're just going to be simple sugars effectively. I think that in the off season of an athletic pursuit, you're controlling the stimulus, right? I mean, at the end of the day, we're inducing stimulus for a response. But at the end of the day, we can control the amount of that stimulus relative to our recovery abilities. When we're in season, we don't control the stimulus. We show up on game day and we got to do what's in front of us. And so I think there was in one of the CrossFit videos, Tia Toomey once said, like, I can't wait for this to be over because I'm so tired of eating so damn much. And, I think that statement was so appropriate because the majority of athletes just weren't fueling relative to what they truly needed. They were just, eating on hunger or doing whatever they felt like. There were nights where I had a CrossFitter at the games that had done 4 workouts that day. The majority of our carbs were liquid carbohydrates, just relative to how close the workouts were together. And, just to get calories in, man, like we're getting burger patties and sometimes just to get some things in, they're like, dude, I'm used to eating fries the night before a workout. Great, go get some fries. Like I'm not saying that's in any way good advice. But from a caloric load standpoint and just simply getting starch in them, like we had to do what we had to do.
Yeah. What about the carnivore community? Like, I'd be curious to hear your take on how, especially physically active or athletic carnivore diet enthusiasts are getting carbohydrates. Because I've looked at guys like Paul Saladino, who's been on the podcast before, and he's now eating, it seems to be like a lot of fruit, and I think honey as well. But then there are other people who I think are more strict carnivore diet enthusiasts. Like I think Sean Baker is one, and I honestly don't really know where or if they're actually consuming carbohydrates.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny because actually at the local gym that I go to a Lifetime here where I live. One of the trainers, he's like, yeah, I'm eating nothing but meat and berries and doing carnivore. And I actually hadn't heard of berries like making their way into the carnivore diet. I was like, I didn't know fruit was now part of the carnivore diet. I didn't know if that was some evolution that I missed. I can't imagine in classical carnivore diet that carbohydrate does exist. I mean, maybe we're getting glucose from some level of gluconeogenesis, but like we're not directly getting carbohydrates. That's for sure.
Yeah, well, I mean, I can't think of many long-lived populations, or I suppose like established civilizations who really follow a strict carnivore diet. Maybe there's some random, I don't know, Inuit whale blubber eating population or some tribe that's subsisting on fermented meat and blood, but it's pretty few and far between that you can like epidemiologically identify a strict example of carnivory, which is why I think probably a lot of these influencers who are championing a carnivore diet are all of a sudden eating whatever avocados and fruit and berries and honey and the like.
And I think effectively what you're going to see is that you're going to see it evolve more or less into a paleo type protocol, which again, like I never once had anything against a paleo type diet. I mean, I think if you trace its roots, it was more so an autoimmune diet. And to like what you were saying, why did a lot of the people initially when undertaking the paleo diet feel better? I do think they probably had some underlying things that you don't know what you don't know. You don't know how good you can feel until you feel that way, or you don't know how bad you feel until you feel good. And I think some of these people, it's like, man, they had never experienced life with removing some of these things that they had grown up 30 plus years used to. And so, yeah, I mean, I think you're going to see an evolution towards that. I think that quite honestly, paleo-ish, and I'll use that very loosely, is a reasonable foundation for the way that the majority of people should eat. But I'll still stand by the fact I don't think it's ever going to fuel high level athletics. But to your point, most society, the 1% is the 1% for a reason. It's not the 100%.
Yeah, I agree. And the paleo diet, I think the history of it, even though I'm not 100% sure this is correct, I'm just going to claim it to be correct, is largely driven by an interest in controlling autoimmunity, right? Eliminating wheat and soy and gluten and sometimes nightshades and seeds and nuts to help people relieve things like, I don't know, eczema or rheumatoid arthritis or gut issues that could be brought on by largely plant defense compounds. I mean, that's how I came across the paleo diet. Was my wife had horrible skin issues, acne and eczema, and this was in college, and I was already in nutrition studies at University of Idaho, but I'd never heard of this. She brought back this it was actually this crappy, cheesy, like, those plastic coil bound books with the plastic cover on them and like the printed 8.5 by 11 title. And it was by Lauren Cordain, who I later found out was the grandfather of the paleo movement or something like that. And it was called The Dietary Cure for Acne. And it was basically the paleo diet. It's like, well, cut out grains and cut out dairy and be careful with these different plants and legumes. And I watched her skin transform like within 2 to 3 days. And she felt fantastic. And then I started talking with my clients about it and started experimenting with at least the general idea of food elimination, which at the time, I mean, my diet was shop the perimeter of the grocery store and buy what happens to be on sale. Cause I'm living paycheck to paycheck essentially as a personal trainer. And, and so I realized there was something to it. But again, that was my initial exposure to it was, you're controlling autoimmunity, right? Like eczema and acne and skin rashes and skin issues by cutting out offending foods.
Yeah, I mean, I would say since that period of time, paleo itself, like the movement has died down a little bit, but I still think something you hear referenced all the time is AIP, like autoimmune paleo. And I honestly couldn't discern the difference, quite honestly, between autoimmune paleo or paleo. I mean, to some degree, they're the same protocols. So yeah, I mean, I always understood it to be an amazing diet for assisting with autoimmunity. And I still think it's fantastic in that application. But, when we look at 3 distinct goal sets and something that like we talk about it at our, at NCI quite a bit, it's, we talk about the goal set of performance, the goal set of aesthetics, and the goal set of longevity. They're just different. Like, someone that's going to live to be 120 years old, didn't play in the Super Bowl and wasn't Mr. Olympia. And so therefore the diets are largely going to be different. Yeah.
Same thing, much to the chagrin of a lot of people. I think in my experience, largely females, but these days also males, higher body fat percentages are often associated with longevity. I'm not talking about like the, what do you call it, man? The healthy fat or the healthy obesity, idea, which I consider to be a myth. Yeah. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about, being cut and lean and having a 12-pack abs all year long is not synonymous with longevity.
It's a stressor.
Yeah.
I mean, at the end of the day, we know the way to live a long time is to reduce your stressors. And, foundationally speaking, any navigation away from your set point is a stressor. And so a reduction in body fat is only stimulated, we know, by creating a calorie deficit. So either intentionally restricting or intentionally burning excess calories. And that is stressful. Like whether we want to acknowledge it or not, looking a certain way is a stressor to the body. And people hate hearing that. I mean, dude, I'm a former anorexic. I hate it with everything in me. And I still struggle with it. I mean, knowing what I know, I couldn't sit here and tell you I do everything properly. But it's one of those things where what I know and what my, brain will allow me to do at times, it's different, man.
Yeah. And I'll put a link to Jason's photo, if you're not watching the video right now, over at bengreenfieldlife.com/Jason P. It's bengreenfieldlife.com/JASONP. But you wouldn't have guessed that you were formerly anorexic, Jason. But what exactly happened?
Yeah. Well, long story short, I graduated high school and I thought I was going to play golf for a living. Like I thought that was my calling. And I experienced my first ever injury and found myself like in the rehab setting and just kind of in, honestly, like I really enjoyed the gym. At that same time, I got approached by a modeling recruiter that was from Abercrombie and Fitch. This is 2002. So it's like every male's like wet dream to be an Abercrombie.
Oh yeah, that was back in the days of the highly controversial Abercrombie catalogs, where one of my wife's classmates was in the issue where he was like wake surfing naked behind a boat with a Christmas tree over his crotch or something like that, and everybody's parents were freaking out about their kids buying Abercrombie and Fitch because it was like quasi porn and back in that day. Yeah.
Yeah. So I got recruited to be in the magazine. But I'll never forget, like when I left the store that day, the recruiter said to me, she said, "Hey, when you send your pictures, make sure you send pictures of your abs." And like, dude, again, I was a golfer. Like I ate nothing but like burgers, mac and cheese, chicken. Like I was the all American like dieter.
Yeah.
Like I ordered Taco Bell with no lettuce. Like I hated vegetables. And
No. You were autoimmune paleo before it was cool.
I was everything but autoimmune paleo. So I was the reason AIP was built, I'm pretty sure. But honestly, I asked everyone, like, how do I get abs? And, my pediatrician at the time, good family friend, he said, it's all nutrition, read the magazines and read the periodicals. And so I did. I read everything I could get my hands on. And basically, 2002, everything in a magazine was like, don't eat this, don't eat this, don't eat this, cardio. And so I was at Gold's Gym every day, training for 2 hours and, basically eating less than 800 calories. And it took me into a pretty dark place, man. It took me to anorexia. Anorexia took me into a pretty big downward spiral in my life. So much so that, each night honestly, I contemplated ended my life multiple times. Just because it honestly, it didn't feel worth living. Like I'd go to my bedroom after dinner. I would do sit-ups because I thought I was getting fat. And, then I'm like, why am I doing this? I'm not hanging out with friends. I have nothing. And, it was, dude, it sucked. It was a gnarly place.
Man. So when did the turnaround happen?
So ironically, one of the things that came with that was, hormonal decline. I couldn't hold any sort of job because at about 2:00 in the afternoon every day, I would just be extremely tired. It wasn't even like I desired a nap. It was like if I was on concrete, I'd lay down and go to sleep. Like it was awful. But Gold's Gym had a job opening the gym from 5 a.m. to 11. And I was like, well, that's perfect. It's the only time I have any energy and it's the only environment I like being in. So I got a job opening the gym and one of the trainers saw what I was doing to myself. And so there was a bodybuilder that would come in every day towards the end of my shift. He was getting ready for a bantamweight national show. And he was pretty lean, but not he's not a fucking monster by any means. And so I was like, well, cool. I want to look like him. And she was like, I do his training and nutrition. And I was like, can you do mine? And she said, sure. And so she told me that day, you need to eat 4,000 calories a day. Now, looking back on it, horrible advice.
Why do you say that was horrible advice looking back on it?
I mean, I don't think if an anorexic person came to me today eating 800 calories a day, my first advice would be go eat 4,000 calories, knowing absolutely nothing about the person.
Okay.
I think, mentally there's a pretty significant chance that we gain weight reasonably rapidly. And, anorexics don't have a great relationship with the scale.
Okay. Yeah. It'd freak him out. That's just too much too soon versus like a crawl, walk, run type of strategy.
Exactly. So, but, I put trust in it. And so it's 02. I went to, there's no calorie, there's no MyFitnessPal or anything at the time. And so I went to Barnes & Noble. I got a calorie counter book and I wrote out meal plans every day. The one thing anorexics don't lack is discipline. And so I went each night, I wrote the meal plan, I made the food, I brought it with me to work the next day. And, 3 weeks later, I think I'd gained a little over 10 pounds, maybe 12 pounds. And I remember looking in the mirror as I was opening the gym and I was like, man, I'm not fat. And I was like, this food thing's not so bad after all. Shortly after that, I got blood work done. My testosterone level was that of a 90-year-old man. I got put on androgel, and between, getting my calories back up and the cream, I actually started feeling like a normal 18, 19-year-old again. And that's actually what sparked me getting into health and fitness, as a profession. At Gold's, I transferred over. I got certified as a trainer. My PT director had graduated from Florida State. So I transferred schools to Florida State, got my degree, and that was it, man. That's what got me in the space.
Wow. I want to talk more about the work that you do now, but getting on testosterone that early, did you have to wean yourself off of that, or are you kind of on testosterone for life now?
Yeah, interesting. So when I went to school, I went to get a refill on it, and they couldn't for the life of them figure out why I would have been put on it at 19 years old. And, by the time I got there, man, I was at the peak of anorexia. I was 118 pounds. By the time I was in Tallahassee going to school, I was probably almost 165-ish pounds, 170. And so, pretty normal 19-year-old looking dude at 170 pounds. And they're like, yeah, you just want steroids. And so they pulled me off. And so they wouldn't give it to me, but then my levels actually came back down. So we had blood work done again 90 days later. They'd come back down. The doctors were like, okay. And honestly, like I needed HRT ever since. I've never been able to completely get off. And so I've been on testosterone replacement since 20 years old, full time, 19 years now.
Have you tried anything like Clomid or HCG or enclomiphene or anything like that?
So I've been able recently, and when I say recently, the last 2 to 3 years. So to really get my test dose down with using HCG more frequently, and I actually feel better. At one point I was as high as like 1 cc a week, 200 milligrams a week.
Oh, wow.
When I got my lifestyle more in order, we started to see my numbers get as high as like 1,200, which is ridiculous. And so we pulled me down. Now I'm on 500 milligrams a week, 100 milligrams a week, so 0.5 cc's a week. But I do use HCG 3 times a week.
Probably one of the number one questions that I get from guys these days is, and maybe this is because there's so many hormone and testosterone farms now, right? Where you fill out a quiz and you get your prescription for your androgel or your injectable, your enclomiphene or whatever. I mean, I freaking recently sent out an email to my list about one. It was called Maximus, right? But it is very similar. It's pretty easy, even at a young age, to get on this stuff. So a lot of times people ask me, well, what do you think about like what Huberman says, about testosterone, I think is one that he talks about, or tribulus is also very popular. There are these herbal strategies that seem to be all over the internets and the Reddit's forums, et cetera. What do you think about those approaches?
I mean, I don't think Trib has any peer-reviewed data behind it that I've seen. Maybe Huberman has, new stuff that I haven't seen. I certainly haven't looked in quite some time. Testosterone seems to be new. I haven't gone into the rabbit hole of researching that. We just brought a new chief science officer into NCI, and so I'd be better served to ask him on that. I mean, when I was coming up, man, it was the days of McGuire and Ergo Farm, and so like 1AD and 6OXO, 1TU, so androstenedione, androstenediol, the 1 and 4ADs were the big ones. I will say, like, I don't remember, I don't want to misquote, but I think it was like the 1-4 or it was 4, but there was one that actually helped, and then there was one that suppressed me while I was on HRT. So I remember the first time I took 1AD, all my friends were like, this is the best thing ever. You need it for the gains. And like, I took it and I actually instantly felt like shit. So, I could never explain that. But, to your point, man, I think that a lot of HRT is not well distributed, and I don't think it's well controlled. I know for a long time, it was my general practitioner providing it. He's like, sure, just take 1 cc a week. Here's 1 milligram of anastrozole a week. He wouldn't even discuss HCG or Clomid. Then I went to a clinic like you described, and they're like, oh, well, do you want to add some DECA? Do you want to add some Anavar? And I'm like, listen, I'm not trying to run a cycle. At this point, I'm 39 years old. I got a 5-year-old. Like, I'm genuinely trying to feel good and be here for my daughter.
I'm not trying to be the liver king.
Right.
Sorry, Brian Johnson. That was mean. But yeah, I get what you're saying. And, my take on a lot of those herbal blends, Jason, is that I've seen more concrete evidence for like icing the balls and red light therapy than I have for a lot of that stuff. And definitely more evidence for lifting with the legs where there's a larger concentration of androgen receptors, or sleeping, or managing stress, or even, adequate sunlight. But I think one of the reasons they work is they do upregulate the central nervous system. They do give you energy, and they definitely increase libido. And I think there's this positive feedback loop between exercising more and having more sex and accomplishing more, and a natural endogenous rise in testosterone. I think that's why a lot of people just feel better on some of the herbal products. I don't think it's a direct, steep, significant rise in total or free testosterone. I think it's an affect on lifestyle that results in a positive feedback loop for endogenous production.
Yeah, I would completely agree. I mean, I don't think we haven't seen anything stand the test of time. There's been several that come and go that claim they're the herbal thing. I think everything in the supplement industry is mildly cyclical. And so you see things pop off. It's proven that it doesn't really work. And then, it goes away for 2 or 3 years, and then it comes back as like the next greatest thing. And, I think Trib is no different. There's another one that's escaping me that, was really popular for a minute that it didn't work out. I've been behind the scenes at some supplement companies. I've sat in the office of like the president of a major supplement company and heard how they describe certain ingredients and the way they're going to market them. And so I have very little faith in the majority of supplements in the absence of any kind of peer-reviewed study. And we just haven't seen anything hold up in the test of time.
Yeah. Well, if everything's cyclical, we got maybe a few months before marathoning and power bars become the fad. Really high shorty shorts, big old Nikes. So the Nutrition Coaching Institute, I think you called the NCI. Yeah. You and I haven't talked a lot about that, but I think, at least for my audience, I think people get confused about the qualifications or certifications or credibility of folks who they're seeking nutrition advice from.
Yep.
And I don't think that social media and influencer status and people posting their meals and then their andro carved bods has helped out much with that. So in your description, like, how would you differentiate between the types of people out there offering nutrition advice or even nutrition coaching, right? Between like an RD or a nutritionist or whatever.
Yeah, I think that the biggest thing to understand is scope of practice in general. I mean, I think it's clear the only people that can provide any sort of meal planning are registered dietitians. Like that's abundantly clear. And so any nutrition coach that's giving you a meal plan is 100% breaking the law.
I'm going to totally apologize for already derailing you, but when it comes to that, does it differ in terms of how it's positioned? Like a meal plan that's served up as a prescription versus a meal plan that says, here's a sample meal plan that satisfies what it is that you want to accomplish without claiming like it's a customized prescription. Does that make sense?
Yeah. So that's the way to beat it. I think that a lot of times, so if we go back to like, again, 2012-ish, like when I first came into the space, it was very common for coaches to send you a meal plan. Here's what I want you to eat. And that was illegal. Again, that's kind of the infancy of the online coaching movement. So it wasn't watched. I don't even know how well it's watched today, quite honestly, but clearly online coaching is much bigger today than it was 12 years ago. But yeah, I mean, it's not illegal for a coach to go in and say, here's what I believe you should do. If I were you, this is what I think you should do. This is nothing more than me telling you what I believe to be true. Take from it like what you want. But what I'm really doing as your coach is you're telling me what you're doing every single week, and I'm telling you how to adjust that based on what I believe to be true.
Right.
And so it's nothing more than advice. And you really have to label yourself a coach. I mean, that's why we named our institute, the Nutritional Coaching Institute. And we build coaches, people that are there to help you navigate life effectively, more so through the vehicle of what you're consuming nutritionally. And so it definitely, over time, more and more, any cases that have gone to court, like there was one that I believe went to court in Florida where a nutritional coach was challenged, and because the person observed scope of practice, the coach was found that they were doing everything correctly.
Now, when you say they observe scope of practice, you mean they were able to supply meal planning advice without it being prescriptive?
Yeah, and I would actually argue most coaches in the space today aren't even providing meal plans. Like most coaches are actually going to like macronutrient protocols.
Okay.
But even there, you have to be super careful, man. Like I can't be like, hey Ben, your prescription is 200 protein, 400 carb, 80 fat. Like the way that I present this to you has to be like, based on this information, this is what we see happening with your body. If you wanted to do this, if you wanted to make the change, science tells us this. This is how I would anticipate you starting. And then it's like, here, fill out this information over the course of the next 7 days. Let me know what you do, and then I'll help you interpret that in a week.
Right.
You have to be very careful that you're not in any way creating prescriptive measures.
And that would be for anybody who's not an RD, a registered dietitian.
Anyone not a registered dietitian, or I would assume, and again, you can't quote me on this one, but I would assume a medical professional of any degree.
Okay, so at NCI, the Nutrition Coaching Institute, what do you guys do exactly? Like, what are you providing to people?
Yeah, so effectively, when we built NCI 2016, 2017, the other certifications existed. So there's JB and the guys at PN. There's NASM. I think ISSA has one.
And by the way, ISSN, that's another one. I have that one, the ISSN. Yeah.
So Jose Antonio. Yep, they're fantastic. And so all of those places are phenomenal in terms of knowledge, right? And so when we built NCI, I was like, man, like there's people way smarter than me for sure. But there's people that are not getting amazing client results. They could score 100% on a multiple choice test when it comes to nutritional knowledge, but they have no idea what they're doing in the real world of application. And so really like what we've gone out is we've taken, all right, here's the science, but here's how you apply it in a real world scenario when clients are coming to your door. Like, how do you take somebody that's tried every diet under the sun, that's currently consuming 800 calories, that if you feed them more, they gain weight potentially before they lose weight? How do you connect with that person? How do you get them through that journey? How do you observe scope of practice? And how do you actually be the leader that they need? Nobody had ever bridged the gap from science to application in the nutritional space. And that was really what we set out to do.
So can you give me an example of what that looks like in terms of you discovering some scientific principle, or in reverse, like somebody else discovering some scientific principle and either doing a good job, or for illustrative examples, like a crappy job, applying that to a client in a practical real world scenario?
Yeah, I think the most common one that people would connect to is like, okay, go read any textbook and we talk about fat loss, right? It's going to lead you pretty straight to like understanding daily energy expenditure and then creating a caloric deficit, right? Either through some sort of mild food restriction and or increase in activity. I think everybody can agree like that's going to be the same across the board, right? Like you don't need a nutritional certification to understand that that's all over Google. The average person that's showing up today, 2024, has tried, I don't know, 8 diets, 9 diets. They're probably showing up with, the effects of that, but they're probably showing up afraid to consume any more than 800 to 1,000 calories. And so wherein do you connect with an individual? How do you get an individual on board to be consuming an adequate amount of calories? How do you lead them through that journey? That's not addressed in the textbook, because the textbook says, well, just give the person 2,000 calories, right? Well, what if the person is only willing to go to like 1,200 or 1,400? How do you navigate that? Well, the average person also comes to us, if you do an intake form, what are your goals? Well, I want to look better. I want to look better and I want to perform better. It's like, okay, so you want to lose body fat and you want to increase potential strength and performance at the same time. So like scientifically, what the book is going to tell you is calorie deficit, but calorie maintenance and or surplus. Well, like when have you ever navigated an individual that can be in a deficit and a surplus at the same time? And obviously there's semantics here, right? There's certain people that, sure, like there's recomp possible. There's certain people, depending on their training age, where they're at their season, that like you could achieve multiple sets of goals. But at the end of the day, the average person, like at their current start point, is probably going to reach a point of diminishing returns in their aesthetic pursuit when it comes to their performance. And how do you explain that to them?
So that's interesting. And by the way, I think that the number one way to get somebody who's not eating enough calories to get more is basically how many letters? What is a 10 letter word called nut butter? Maybe a 13 letter word called peanut butter. That's how to increase calorie intake fast. But when it comes to the NCI, so you're basically taking people who, and correct me if I'm wrong, already have some kind of a certification, like they're a personal trainer or they're a doctor or something like that, and then you're equipping them with the knowledge to be able to do the type of coaching that you just talked about?
So yes and no. So that's some of the population. So I would argue 50% of the population that comes to us is already in the fitness industry to some degree, and they have some level of knowledge around nutrition. There's another 50% that comes to us that they just want a career change. they're like, you know what, I want to do remote work. Health and fitness has helped me in some way in my life, and I want to learn how to now, pay it forward to others and change their lives.
Okay. I don't know if this is a question other people are wondering, but sometimes if I'm wondering, I know there might be a small handful of other people curious about this. How much money does a nutrition coach actually make? Like, is that a sole profession nowadays?
Yeah. So I wish I actually had the tab open because I just was like going through it. So, industry standard, I think for nutrition coaches, and this could be off. So I'm going to give you a delta of like 20K. I think was like 65K. The average, so this is where like subtle flex, the average coach through NCI that has gone through both our certification program and our business development program is making upwards of 120,000 per year. So we've doubled the industry standard through what we've been able to teach in connection and application.
Okay. Yeah, that's significant. Number one thing that I think I get asked if I get asked business questions is not necessarily how do I get smarter, how do I gain more education, how do I get more knowledge. It's more like a lot of really smart, pretty well educated, driven people out there who have a decent amount of intelligence, but don't know how to market themselves. So would you say
100%.
that the increase in profit that you're generating via NCI is based on teaching people how to get out there more, how to have more visibility? And if so, are there any tips that you'd share that, don't delve too deeply into your secret sauce?
Yeah, so I think it's a combination of a few things. I mean, I think to answer the direct question, is being a nutrition coach a standalone career first? Like it is. Like I had my coaching practice hit $3 million before I sold it. I've helped others build multi-million-dollar nutrition coaching practices. So it certainly is a standalone thing. That being said, I think you only get to those levels if you possess three very specific skills. The first of which is you actually need to be able to create change for a human. I think that the biggest problem in this space right now is people see the financial opportunity and they're not well enough equipped to create that change. They actually suck at what they do.
And by the way, I think one big reason for that is coaches treat everybody else like they treat themselves and assume their fitness and nutrition program is what's going to work for the person that's hired them.
I completely agree.
Yeah.
I completely agree. I mean, I consulted with one business literally that was doing over 100K a month. That's what they were doing, and I had to walk away from that consulting job because I obviously ethically didn't align. But yeah, I mean, so the first skill is obviously the ability to create change, and that's super noble. And I think if we're marketing, we're like, oh, impact. NCI is, we talk about the impact, the billion person mission. That's amazing, but you're not going to touch anyone's life if you can't get clients. And if you can't get clients, you're not going to change anyone's life in this world. So I actually think it's incumbent upon coaches to learn how to monetize their skills. But you talked about earlier being a personal trainer. Charging money for your services does not make a business. Your ability to transactionally monetize and charge somebody something is not a business. It doesn't mean that you understand top line revenue and bottom line profit. It doesn't mean you know how to maintain a P&L. It doesn't mean you understand growth and scale and any of those things. And so the third skill would obviously be understanding how to run a business. So do I attribute NCI's increased earnings to our marketing alone? No, I think we've equipped people with multiple skills. Inside of that, do we teach marketing? Absolutely. Because part of monetization and part of business is marketing.
Yeah. The number one way that I made a name for myself, and people don't like to hear my answer to this when they ask me this question, but it's content. And specifically, I spent over 10 years with long form content, right? 60 to 90 minute podcasts, 3,000 plus word articles that I'd be writing in the backs of taxis and Ubers and on airplanes. Content was always my model. And now I'm kind of wondering how much AI is going to disrupt that. Because you could obviously churn out 10 3K word articles in 15 minutes now with good prompts for AI. So I'm just kind of wondering if the algorithms will change. But I mean, that was really the number one thing that I did was I just created a massive amount of content to establish expert status in my industry. And that still is probably the number one source of incoming traffic for me.
Yeah. I mean, listen, if I had to start over again, if you said, you need to build a business that makes, I don't know, 300K in the next 12 months. I would probably spend the first 11 months trying to make $0 and just creating content and becoming visible and adding value. And then I would come up with a really good launch in month 12 and make the $300,000. I think people underestimate, you said 10 years. I mean, that's how I first found out about you, is I consumed so much of your content. It's one of those things where people underestimate the longevity of what they've been able to do. I remember our company's 8 figures, and like last year everyone's like, oh, like overnight you blew up, and I'm like, yeah, overnight 20 years. Yeah. I've been doing this since like just after anorexia. So it's 20 years of doing things. I think content is always going to be important. To answer your question on AI, I don't think AI is going to disrupt anything for the next 3 years in our space. I don't think long form content is leveraged enough for it to be a big disruptor. I think that too many people have gone to shorter form content. They're expecting like creating reels and shorter videos to convert faster, when I don't necessarily agree with that content strategy holistically. I think it's certainly part of a content strategy, but I think that people that adopt longer forms of content will be better. But I also think people that are really good at what they do, man, like you're extremely intelligent, your shit, and I had a conversation with Lane Norton recently. Lane's obviously extremely intelligent, and Lane didn't know how to market for shit. Lane might not know how to market now, but he's built a really big business.
Yeah.
And, and I told him that. I was like, like jokingly, because he's a friend, I'm like, dude, I made more money than you faster, and you're way smarter than you've forgotten more than I'll ever know. And it's like, but I learned the marketing side and the content side faster. He's really good at what he does, and in the absence of marketing was still able to produce. I think that the fastest growing businesses blend the two. You're extremely talented at what you do, and you understand the game of marketing and sales.
Yeah, that's like, it reminds me of like, I don't know, Chris Masterjohn, right? He's another guy, a friend of mine, super smart. I would say he's really, really dialed in on content and intelligence and knowledge, but probably from a marketing and a branding standpoint could use some improvement. I could say this about like my dad has a company, right? They're water filters, and it's great stuff, imported from Tel Aviv in Germany and, hand assembled. And it's like the Cadillac of water filters. But I would say like marketing, getting the name out there, and, the general branding could be improved, because as you alluded to earlier, a good product doesn't mean that you're making money. You actually have to have the marketing component. And I think with the AI, I'm working on updating my book Boundless, Jason. And I was thinking about this the other day. I was working on a chapter on GABA, and I was telling a story of me having too much alcohol and waking up in the wee hours and basically spinning this tale that was creatively written, and then getting into, okay, so if you do wake up at night, you got transdermal solutions for GABA, like a somnium cream, or you got passion flower, valerian, or you could straight up go to a supplement that contains gamma aminobutyric acid, and kind of weaving all this together. And I think that for content is what AI could be weak on, is the personal story, the experiential approach, the textbooks will tell you this works, but here's what actually happens if you've had 2 glasses of wine instead of 1 the night before. And here's what to do if this makes you groggy in the morning, because the AI didn't tell you you're going to need to install a light box on your desk if you're going to use this solution at 3 a.m. in the morning so that you can wake up and be alert. Like, I think that's where AI falls short, is consolidating everything and also telling a compelling story prior to sharing that knowledge,
I think if you think back to a lot of the content you wrote in your earlier days, very, very little of it would you consider just like purely academic, I guess is the word, right? Like obviously very info packed, solutions to people's problems, but always, paired anecdotally with a story, with something that had some level of entertainment value, so that people would, continue reading the article and or listening to the podcast. There's no recitation of facts for 90 minutes that is holding anybody's attention. It has to be mixed with entertainment. And, I think that people also just crave connection, man. Like, we had Tom Bilyeu at our event last year, and Tom's huge on the AI movement.
He's great.
And he's there, dude, and he's scaring the living shit out of everybody in attendance. And my whole shtick has been that I think it's going to be hard for AI to replace EQ. Tom is of the opinion that EQ can be surmised by AI, that EQ can actually be intelligently understood algorithmically, and which is mind blowing to me if that's the case. But I think we have recent events in the world that prove that humans crave connection. I mean, 2020, the world shuts down. Everything digitally blew up because people were on Zoom. People were, doing their workouts remotely. 2023, the world reopens. All of a sudden, people are exiting the digital platforms. Ask Peloton how that worked out for them. And it's like, people want that connection to another human being. And so I think if we leave out the human element of anything, I think that we're leaving way too much behind. And that's why I think we're still a couple years away from AI really hitting. I think AI will figure it out. I think that the people in the AI world will figure out how to weave stories and stuff in. But I just don't think we're there yet.
Yeah. And even if you do have the belief that reading is going to become a more useless skill, or writing is going to, I should say writing specifically, not reading, but writing is going to become a more useless skill as AI progresses. Well, I tell my sons this: if you're a good writer, you're going to be a good prompt engineer. And even if AI is creating the majority of content, if you're prompting it intelligently and interpreting what it puts out intelligently and editing it intelligently, you're still going to be ahead of the curve when it comes to creating unique and compelling content. But what about the meal plans, man? Like, it seems to me that if you're a nutrition coach, and I don't know how this fits into the operating inside the scope of practice, maybe you do, and you're using AI, possibly even more effectively than your brain, to generate an appropriate nutrition plan for someone, do you think that's going to affect the nutrition coaching industry?
Well, I mean, again, I think it's how it's delivered. So staying inside of scope of practice, I think that delivering a meal plan is something I would never dive into. I'll tell you, as a safeguard for me, every time I operated as a coach and when I was working with individuals, anytime we dove into meal plans, I always made a collaborative effort to where it could never be perceived that I was the one building the meal plan. And so I went in with parameters of advice. I would ask very specific questions. I would watch the person create the meal plan. And by the end of it, they would almost ask me, would you approve of something like this? I would say yes. And at that point, they had constructed the meal plan. Do I think that can be done through AI? Yeah, I genuinely do. I think that's something that will probably start showing up more and more. I think obviously at NCI, we get approached all the time with different tech platforms. And so we've had a couple tech platforms come out to us and, say that they're working on AI meal planning type softwares, and asking us if we have interest. So I know it's being worked on. I don't know where it's at in terms of actual progress, but I mean, I think that it would be a massively valuable tool.
People still want the one-on-one help, the accountability, the support, the tribe. I mean, I have clients who I coach for fitness and nutrition. They repeatedly tell me the number one value add that they get is being able to ask me questions at any time during the day and get personalized replies. Like, it's not, oh, hey, I'm following the fitness template you wrote, or these different meals that you recommended, or this supplement regime. It's all, I like being able to ask you questions about something I heard in a podcast, and is that right for me? Or I'm going out to a steakhouse tonight. Here's the menu. What do you think I should order? And I think it's the personal touch.
Yeah, it's one of my first big things with clients. I'm like, man, if you're out to dinner, you don't know what to order, take a picture, send it to me, and I'll help you. People are like, wow, I could do that. And also to some degree, there's an element your clients want to make you proud. We're recording this between Christmas and New Year's, and one of those things is like, we had a lot of coaches are like, oh my God, I'm afraid to take time off. Like, my clients are going to be so mad if they can't check in with me. And I was like, the majority of your clients that you reach out to and say, hey, I'm taking a week off, they'll reply back and say, I'm so happy for you, because they actually want what's best for you. Your clients become very invested in your happiness as well, assuming you're doing a good job. And so they want to make dad proud, right? And so they can't wait to send that text check-in. Oh my God, I'm down so many pounds. I'm down to pant size. I crushed it today. I killed it in the gym, whatever it might be. There's that part of it too that is non-numerical, non-data driven, just human connection driven.
Yeah, exactly. And most of them are going to double down on January 1st and double or triple the amount of questions they ask you anyways. So it's fine to take a week off before then. So I've got just one other thing I wanted to ask you about. You've obviously studied up on the industry quite a bit, and I'm sure that you've got your own training or nutrition routines that you've assembled that seem to work based on the combination of science and experience and the discussions that you've had in the industry. So, this doesn't have to be an hour-long TED Talk, but I'm just curious what your big wins are as far as your routine that you engage in each day, whether it's your exercise routine, your meals, or certain supplements that you're just like, yeah, these are desert island, compounds, that type of thing.
So I don't get into supplementation a ton. I just, obviously I've been on HRT. I try to control that and, maximize that, but that's really it on that side. Not saying that I shouldn't or that I don't think I should. I haven't. I've spent the majority of my time really just on business development. Nutritionally speaking, I think that, first I'll say training. I train 3 to 4 times a week max. I found that, I'm 39 now. I used to be a 6-day-a-week guy. I know that I actually get better gains. I get better adaptation. The less I train, the more I can recover. And I think some of that has to do with just my overall stress profile. I wouldn't say I go so far as to like the minimum effective dose, but I think I've figured out what the appropriate dose is. It took me a very long time to get comfortable with that. Like I knew subconsciously I should be training less, but it was hard for me to do that. I would say I'm very comfortable with that now. I do primarily full body work. I'm actually, my training is more geared around golf specific work. I'm actually trying to play high level golf. So I'm trying to become one of the top, 20 amateur golfers in the world.
Wow.
So that's my current pursuit.
And by the way, you said something that was very important there. You do full body training. And I was talking with a client about this earlier today, Jason. They're into body part splits. And here's the problem. They're a busy traveling executive. So they'll hit like whatever, chest and shoulders on a Monday, and then arms on a Tuesday, get, maybe core in on a Wednesday, and then take off for a week and be unable to train and come back and they've trained like half their body. And that's look, for me personally, my hack is full body strength 3 times a week. Because even if I miss a session, I've still triggered that muscle group at least once that week.
Exactly. That's exactly why I crossed over. Same thing. I knew I could commit to 3 to 4 a week. I just couldn't commit the same 3 to 4 days each week.
Yeah.
And so it's all become full body. And honestly, I enjoy it too. I'm still making, strength gains, performance gains. Mobility is a high priority for me right now. I would say nutritionally, man, like I'm very intuitive. I'm not extremely numerical. Habitually, given that I have a past with anorexia, I would say I err on under eating. But I also enjoy dinner. I enjoy kind of like ending my work day with a dinner. Now, this doesn't mean like eating junk at dinner all the time, but it means like sometimes going out for a nice steak. It means sitting down as a family. Like my daughter will say she loves family dinner. And so I would say I backload the majority of my calories to dinner. Maybe 40% of them are at dinner. I would say I found that the same breakfast works for me 90% of the time. And then, I have various snacks that are go-tos throughout lunch or throughout the day rather. Mm-hmm. And so these are things that when I'm traveling, it's the same breakfast. I can get at virtually any breakfast restaurant. The things that I interchange throughout the day, I can find virtually anywhere. And then the dinners, I would say I probably have 6 or 7 different options so that they don't get overly stale throughout the week. And again, these are things that I can find out. And I would say, again, almost not to champion anorexia, but like you learn a lot about your body. You learn a lot about physiological responses and you become very in tune with how you feel. That was probably like the one thing. And so I'm very in tune with how I'm feeling from a recovery standpoint, from an energy standpoint. And I'm intelligent enough in objective enough to say, hey, I need more of this, less of this. Not saying I'm perfect, that I always follow it, but I at least know kind of where I sit on the spectrum most of the time.
Yeah, I achieved the same awareness through bodybuilding and Ironman triathlon, arguably also two pretty unhealthy activities to participate in, at least in the traditional sense of the word. But one of the things that you also mentioned I think is really important is the family dinner and the evening social time. And I'm often asked, Jason, like, oh, well, what's the scientific reason that you save the majority of your calories towards the end of the day? And well, I think you could certainly make a case that carbohydrates might induce a little bit of a serotonin release that causes extra melatonin and sleepiness at night. The number one reason is, well, that's family dinner night. That's social going out night, right? Calorie is a calorie at a certain point. Like if you save a few during the day for being able to be a lot more flexible and have a more robust social life and maybe have an extra helping as you're playing Monopoly with the kids at the dinner table because you're sitting there for an hour and a half anyways. Like it's more of a life hack than it is a scientifically driven principle, Yeah.
And I'm not trying to be elite, with my training. I'm not trying to be elite with, my aesthetics. I'm trying to, my current goals, like I said, I do want to be elite in the sport of golf, and I want to be elite as a father, man. I want to be the best I can day to day in, for my family. But, also, just, I want to be here in, 45 more years. I mean, dude, actually an hour before we recorded this, my uncle finally passed. And he was 82 years old. I'm 39. And so, I look at that from a mortality perspective, and I'm like, man, I'm almost halfway there. I want to live past that, and I want to be around for the moments that will, that will be there as I age. So I think that it's perspective I definitely didn't have in my 20s or my early 30s. It's perspective that I think you only gain as you age. But I'm glad that we're able to create nutritional application around that perspective.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. Two things I think are very powerful, making you question your priorities and motives and how you spend the hours that you do have in the day. One is awareness of your mortality, through the passing of a loved one or a dear one like your uncle. And I think the other one is and this is happening to me right now, so I mentioned it, it's the upcoming realization that this might be the last year that your children are living at home, right? Yeah. And all of a sudden, you're like, oh, I have so many things I still need to equip them with and mentor them about and lead them in. And for me, that's a big theme of this coming year, 2024, is doubling down on fatherhood and leadership for my sons because they're 16. I mean, they're you start to see that writing on the wall. And while I don't swallow hook, line, and sinker the idea that whatever 90 or 95 or 99 or whatever percentage they say of the time you're going to spend with your kids is over by the time they're 18. I want to create a scenario where my kids want to come over and hang out at the house and I see them a lot. But at the same time, it definitely makes you think about how you're spending your day and how you're mentoring your kids when they get close to leaving. So it's
absolutely, man.
Yeah. Well, Jason, you're a fascinating guy. And this NCI, I'm very interested in. I'm going to go explore your website a little bit more because it looks like you're providing folks with a good education. I have a lot of people who listen who are trainers and who work professionally in the field. So I'm sure they'll want to tune into that as well. So I'm going to put all the show notes at bengreenfieldlife.com/JasonP. bengreenfieldlife.com/JasonP. Like I mentioned, my friends at Mind Pump were who originally introduced me to Jason, and they have an interview with him as well that I think was really good, even though mine is better. And you can find that also. I'll link to it at bengreenfieldlife.com/JasonP. So Jason, thanks for coming on the show, man.
Dude, I appreciate it, man. I've been a fan a long time, and so it's an honor to connect and an honor to be here, dude. So I also appreciate you being flexible with everything we've had going on. So thank you so much for getting
me. Sweet, man. All right, folks. Well, Jason Phillips, bengreenfieldlife.com/JasonP. Have an amazing week. Hey, quick thing. Most of you who listen don't subscribe, like, or rate this show. If you're one of those people who do, then huge thank you. But here's why it's important to subscribe, like, and or rate this show. If you do that, that means we get more eyeballs, we get higher rankings, and the bigger the Ben Greenfield Life show gets, the bigger and better the guests get, and the better the content I'm able to deliver to to you. So hit subscribe anywhere you listen. It means way more than you might think. Thanks for listening.